Hello, my name is Brian Hollister. I am the co-founder and CEO of Bonfire and today's host sponsor. Just tell you a little bit about Bonfire. It's not just a company, it's a purpose. It's an experience. It's the spark that was lit by passionate engineers, entrepreneurs, and PhDs that ultimately help design the very standards for what we use today for fiber to the home. We're a value-driven, beer-drinking, fiber-laying team that works tirelessly to enable broadband to communities and businesses that need it the most. We do what we can to provide and partner with service providers, communities, governments to provide education, collaboration, and insight to help each other develop broadband networks that can last, delivering turnkey solutions through our superior planning, engineering, and construction services. That was a mouthful, so hopefully you guys got a good view of what we do. Thanks for everyone for joining today. We're gonna have a lot of fun.
All right, and let's slide over the screen to the other Brian.
I'm the other Brian.
You're actually, as I tell every time, Brian, Mr. Worthen is, I call him our Ed McMahon. He is a staple on Beer and Broadband. He is truly, he keeps us grounded, keeps us so that we don't get too crazy, but provides an amazing amount of insight. So thank you again, Mr. Worthen, for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm the CEO of Visionary Broadband and Mammoth Networks, and we just completed our 477 report for the FCC, and we just passed the 50,000 census block coverage. So that was a pretty big milestone for us, and we're pretty happy with that. We just completed a significant amount of builds in the last quarter last year, using some funds set aside by the state out of the CARES Act. And I think there's going to be some more funding coming down the pipe. And so I'm starting to hand out Flintstone chewable vitamins to my staff to prepare them for a potential upswing in business.
The gummy bears are the best.
Okay, I'll try those.
Just don't watch out for the gummy bears in Colorado. They might be a little bit, they're a little different.
Yeah. They may help or
hinder. I'm not sure which. All right, let's slide on up the screen to Jordan.
So yeah, Jordan Hasser, I'm the Chief Operating Officer of the Beck Sports Network. We're a subsidiary of a 69-year-old telephone cooperative based here in Steele, North Dakota. Our offices are in Bismarck, but we have 11,000 square miles. We have 11,000 customers, a little over 11,000 customers in that area. My role is basically to run our television network. We're an off-air station owner in Western North Dakota. We partner with an off-air station, Eastern North Dakota. I've been in this role for 15 years. We primarily broadcast local high school and collegiate sports all over the state of North Dakota. In the last 15 years, we've televised just shy of 5,000 games all across, again, North Dakota. And then we're also the primary owner in an indoor football team called the Bismarck Bucks. So we follow them all over the nation, broadcasting their games both home and away. So I'm a TV guy through and through. So
awesome. Welcome. Daniel.
Hey, thanks, Nick. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'm Daniel Friesen, CIO and co-founder of IdeaTech. We're a fiber broadband provider in the state of Kansas. We've built about 3,400 miles of fiber now in the state, focusing mainly on rural areas, underserved areas. We, like Brian Worthen, had a very busy last quarter building a lot of fiber in a hurry for CARES Act funded projects, and everybody's hot off of that with new forms of PTSD, but we're all ready for the next round. I think I'm excited for the industry in total, man. What a great time for us to be where we are here. So thanks for the opportunity.
I think Daniel does have a little bit of PSD, because what he is neglecting to tell you is how much they built in such a short period of time. Can you tell us a little bit about that, Daniel? Because that was quite amazing.
Well, hold on a second. Let's before we get
Oh,
into that,
sorry.
let's finish up. Let's make sure we introduce everybody, because
This is why we keep Nick around.
Karam, all right, take it away.
So I'm Karam from GWI here in the Northeast Outpost of Maine. We service all of Maine. About 10 years ago, we were responsible for standing up the entire middle mile network in Maine. And since then, we've been rolling out last mile. Have, I don't know, thousands of customers. Our goal in life is to have all the 1.3 million people in Maine hooked up to fiber. And recently, we've started looking into the Vermont and New Hampshire market space. We are the first B Corp telecommunications carrier in the United States. So,
Wow.
which was a great day. So we joined the likes of Patagonia and Ben and Jerry's in terms of our commitment to the communities. So we're very focused on the rural builds. We do a fair amount of work in the main metro areas also. But our lives are dominated with bringing this thing called fiber to the premise to everybody in our corner of the world. So, and we don't stop till we get there. So everything is pretty joyful. Yeah.
Well, again, on behalf of Beer and Broadband, we're thankful for all of our panelists. And this is, if you're a gambler, this is episode 7. So 7 typically is a lucky number. So we're excited to be talking about monetizing the pipe today and what that means to service providers, to communities, to residents, to businesses, really, getting into a little bit more about the details. And as with all things Beer and Broadband, it is about, providing some nuggets of insight, having a good time, talking to esteemed experts like you guys, and honestly, just enjoying a pint. So before we get started, just cheers to all of you for joining us today. And I look forward to a great conversation.
Absolutely.
All right. So let's get into it. I guess we'll flip back. Well, actually, let me back up. So obviously monetizing the pipe is somewhat of a kind of a generic comment or term, but the idea really is that as service providers, we're trying to, there's a lot of infrastructure being put in the ground. And I think, obviously everybody here is a fan of fiber and what fiber can do and what broadband can do. And one of the stats I saw recently was that, and this is just blows my mind, by 2023, that the consumer broadband and mobile data market will be worth $800 billion on a global basis. Now, on its face, that's like, okay, that's a lot of money, but that's saying that it's bigger than the combined markets of OTT, digital music, digital gaming, smart homes, digital advertising. That's crazy. That's crazy. That means that in order to get to that, clearly there has to be a lot of infrastructure and a lot of monetizing that broadband to reach that kind of scale globally. So,
well, I don't know, Nick. 2023, that's like tomorrow, right? And so this is happening. That number sounds like ridiculous, both 2023 and that we're that old, as well as 800 billion. But I really think we're just getting started. We're all so focused on getting the fiber out there, which is obviously just an endless task. But I'm really excited about, hearing from the panelists today about where they really think this is going, because I think the killer app, of course, the leading app is obviously broadband access. But when I start to think about what can evolve from there and having an intelligent, edge, right, on these networks that then also can provide all kinds of valuable data back into our power line network, right? Our water line network. Today those networks are very dumb and they're archaic, as we know. And I'm just amazed at seeing where this thing is going. And then really, once we really start to tap into all of that, and a power grid can have intelligent actionable data from every single endpoint in a particular community, or the water, company can then also understand everything about the water that's happening. And you think about it, I saw an interesting article where it was saying like up to 40% of our water is wasted through leaking old pipes. And just think if you had an intelligent edge point on every single person's home, providing data back into an AI type of platform that then could obviously analyze that data. It can then understand trends and ultimately obviously can predict outcomes. In my mind, I think the internet is just the first killer app, but it's like, wow, where is this thing going to go? And then how valuable will these networks be in 2030 or 2040 as everything truly then becomes potentially converged? So I don't know, for me, it's like crazy exciting, our industry right now, not because just, the amount of capital coming into it, but we're all realizing what we've been talking about for so long. And these builders that are on the call today, including us, we're still pioneers, even though we've been building fiber for 20 years now, right? All of us combined. So I guess I'd like to pose it out to the team, and what is that a real number? If it's 800 billion, I mean, where do we really think this thing is going in another decade or more, as we start to really see the value of an intelligent edge and combining, right, all of these?
And drink if you're a fiber snob. No, no, it's a great question. So, I mean, I guess to the panel, that is a big number. I mean, let's talk about what is the revenue model for broadband? Where are you making money? What revenue is being driven by broadband today?
I think about this quite a bit when I used to be really happy with my Nokia cell phone, and Nokia owned that market. And look how quickly it changed. And so I started having discussions in public forums about, I don't know as a provider if we have a firm grasp of what the market is in the future, right? We just know it's needed. How it will be used, I don't think we have a firm grasp on that, because now you got people wearing watches to monitor their heart. I don't think we'd anticipated that 3 or 4 years ago. There's applications that are coming down the pipe that totally unknown to us as providers. The point is we need to have that network ready for that, right? So it's not necessarily trying to anticipate everything in the future. It's trying to prepare us for the future, is the way I would put it. So I don't know if I can answer that question fully, other than saying we got to be ready, and we got to stop having conversations about speeds and whatnot. We got to start having conversations about how future-proof we're making our markets and preparing our markets for whatever's going to come, because we're now seeing, I think everybody on the call can agree, that we're now seeing the communities that have not been supportive or ready for broadband, I think is probably the better term. They're not ready. They don't have the ordinances in place. They don't have the the infrastructure to work with a broadband provider, and they're being left behind, and they're not ready for this next wave. And the wave now is people moving into these towns from COVID, the result of COVID, economic development. How does a business move to town? I view it as we just got to be ready to make that network available to whatever purpose in the future.
Yeah, I think history may be a good guide. I mean, the electrification program in the 20s, look where we are. I mean, at least in the Northeast, we're still using the same goddamn poles. I don't know if I'm supposed to say, get vociferous. But 100 years later, we're still using the same pole, right? And look at, if from 1920 on to now, look what electricity is doing. And that was the infrastructure that was set up. Or look at the national highway system in the Eisenhower days, like 1950s. And what do we drive on it that is very different than what was being driven on it in the 1950s? I think this is the same kind of societal trajectory, the infrastructure trajectory. you know, I'm sure in some Star Trek episode, this has been captured by Jean-Luc Picard and his team on what this all ended up being. But if seriously, we took a look at it, you know, they were walking around with tablets in Star Trek, and now we take it for granted, right? I mean, there was a replicator. Granted, it doesn't make us hot tea right now, but it does make us a bunch of 3D printed parts. So I think there's a nice little trajectory there, and I agree. I think it's really, really hard to sort of predict, and I think that's a fool's errand, right? We can get all nutty about what kind of hologram world we're going to live in and what kind of AR and VR we're going to do. That will happen. I think our job is to make sure that whatever is done is good enough for the next generation, the generation after that. And frankly, to also articulate that to the communities, because we feel that's our responsibility, right? We need to be able to make sure that they feel included in that conversation, especially from communities that have never been part of that conversation, whether they're communities of color, immigrant communities, or just communities that are lower on the economic scale, right? So we have to make sure that whatever economic divide that there is today, which is a large one, doesn't keep on perpetuating itself through the infrastructure. So those are, you know.
So let me ask you a question though. So today, and I mean, and obviously Jordan can talk to this, not every broadband connection utilizes the same. Well, not all broadband connections are created equal, right? We can agree with that, obviously. But the other piece of it is not all broadband, even in fiber, not everybody has access to the same things, right? So in some rural areas, maybe some people get sports, maybe some people don't, maybe some people get, you know, live TV, maybe some people get over the top. Like there's different, it's not all created equal, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think from our standpoint, Nick, you make a great point. I think from our standpoint, you know, we've been able to, you know, broadcast high school sports all over the state of North Dakota and I joke with people all the time, you know, I broadcast from the gym with asbestos covered ceilings and 3 rows of bleachers, right? So you would never have thought that was possible, right? I mean, I broadcast this last summer, we broadcast a rodeo and the rodeo was within, you know, probably a quarter mile to half a mile of the nearest ONT. So we brought some wood fiber out, we spliced it, God knows where, in the back of someone's house, ran it through a culvert, and we terminated an outdoor ONT on the outside of a rodeo grounds, right? I mean, we've done cowboy mounted shooting where I took two dishes and went a mile and I hooked them to grain bins, literally strapping grain bins of wireless mimosa dishes point to point to be able to broadcast this stuff, right? So I mean, we utilize it maybe a little bit differently. I think in the rural part of North Dakota, when we talked about this previous, is, you know, there's, with North Dakota being so sparse in population, so big in geographical area, you know, the average population in North Dakota is literally just over 1 person per square mile. Mm-hmm. And so when you think about the distance from home to home, and, you know, we're a rural based community and we're a rural provider, and yet we're providing fiber, miles and miles and miles of fiber. We may run 14 miles and connect up 4 houses, right? And so we have to find a way to monetize that pipe. And one of the ways that we're looking at it is, you know, we offer standard traditional IPTV, which we, just same as everyone else, is trying to migrate away from because it's expensive, but you had to offer it because if you didn't offer TV and it wasn't part of the triple play package, you couldn't compete. And now we're looking at an over the top product. And on top of that, just the security pieces of you know, our watch product, our protect product, or pieces like that. And something so simple as we sell a lot of cameras, right? So we're talking very rural, remote. You could yell and there wouldn't be a soul that would hear you for days, right? We always joke in North Dakota, you can watch your dog run away for 2 days because it's so flat, right? And one of the things that we see, especially this time of year, maybe the last month or two, is cameras in calving barns. So people need to be able to be in their home and monitor the calving that's happening in their calving barn. Think about the fiber brings that to them. Sensors in a water trough. Now, there's probably not a single other person on this call that's ever seen a cattle watering trough. It's a serviceable spot at a corner of 2 pastures coming together where water services it from a well. The problem is in North Dakota, it's 20 and 30 and 40 below. So those have to be electrified in order to keep the water from freezing. Well, we place a monitor within that and a short haul wireless solution to be able to monitor that water. So if the water freezes and the farmer doesn't get to that pasture, God knows how far from his farm, that those cattle don't die. those are, I mean, that's a resource he has, right? So even fuel monitoring, we have driveway sensors that they may live in Wishick and they have to drive 50 miles to the nearest town to work. They want to know if someone drove up there on their property. They want to know that someone crossed their driveway. They want to know, what's happening. And these are people that, again, they could literally be miles away from the nearest person, and yet they can be 50 miles away from their home in rural nowhere and be able to monitor every step, from the calf being born to the fuel tank to make sure no one's stealing fuel, to the water in a pasture, to standard security, to be able to go home and watch a sporting event of their kid who's halfway across the state. So I think in our portion of the world, it's just maybe a little bit different.
Well, I think you're bringing up a good point, though, that, I mean, for so long, it's always been about, that's the triple play, right? Has been a model. And I mean, you listed off like 6 examples of things that you can do with, the right broadband connection that have nothing to do with the triple play.
Oh, he's just getting warmed up too.
Do what?
He's just getting warmed up too.
But I think so. Let's talk about that though for a second though. What are some actual, I mean, obviously Jordan just listed a couple of different use cases. What are some other use cases today? Not Star Trek, which I love the references. But what's today? Like, what are some true use cases that are beyond the basic, triple play kind of view that now can really benefit, are in place today for communities to make things a little bit better for them?
I think something interesting is what we've just heard is the providers on this call are talking about those use cases that are like an emotional tie, right? Within our companies, every one of us has a story about how we saved a post office from having to shut down because we got on broadband, or how we're helping a farmer calve. We all need those to drive us, and so for every company, it's a little different, right? There's companies from Maine here, from Kansas, from North Dakota. Every company has these own internal stories that keep their staff moving and that are ties to the community. Every community is different, right? And rural America has a total different use than on the edge of an urban market. So I think there are a lot of uses, but if I were to summarize what I've heard so far, it's these are stories we use internally to like propel our staff to the next big thing, right?
What do you
and I mean, I would agree, and I mean, the only thing I disagree with so far is I think somebody complained about the GD polls, and those polls have made me a lot of money. So I like those polls, even if they're old. But I think what Brian said and what Jordan said is right. I mean, those anecdotal stories are very motivational and powerful, but I really don't think that they're very significant value add long term. And I think that they're a little distractive, and they are powerful in providing solutions, and we need to do that. But if we look a little further into what we really need to do, and probably why our market is predicted to be $800 billion, is that we're going to get beyond the duct tape and baling wire that we're all doing right now to get service to people that need it now, and pull up our bootstraps and get fiber to all these places. And yeah, I'm a pretty big fiber snob.
All right, drink.
Yeah. Okay, is that the ritual here? This is my first day. But Brian and I have a bit kind of that we do at FISFA, which is a small consortium of competitive providers. It's called Fiber versus Wireless, and so I'm known as the wireless basher in some circles, and and you'll find that interesting if we have time to talk about some of the stories that have gone on in our company in the last 6 months. But the the point about monetizing and where the quality revenue is from a long-term perspective, and the idea that this is going to be an $8 billion market, I think there's going to be revenue everywhere, like everywhere. And I think a large portion of it is going to be related to our network support of next generation mobility. And, mobility today, you think of that in the terms of, this cell phone that can do, 10 to 100 megs of service, but it's really not keeping up with, the demands that we see in the fixed wireless or the fixed internet space and the development there. And you still can't quite do everything on this from a bandwidth perspective. And to get there, everybody knows you need a very fiber rich environment. And so, if we're speaking in terms of, providers, it sounds like a lot of us are in rural parts of the United States, and we likely dominate the fiber infrastructure. We're going to be well positioned to monetize our network with all of the uses of mobility. And I don't really even see, everybody's worried about Elon Musk and his ambitions. I believe he's going to do what he says he's going to do, and he's going to do well. But I think we're going to need all of that. Like, I think what we're doing is we're continuing to open the gates wider, and every time we do that, it gets filled with more and more applications that need that information, that pipe. And I don't think we've really seen the limits of development and where we're headed. And this is, Google was brilliant, 10 years ago when they created this, 1 gig kind of standard for the market, and it created this market disruption and this competitive response to a need that didn't exist at the time. But they knew they're going to create the need, and they're the ones that fill the pipe, right? That's what they want. They don't want to be the provider. They want to sell the stuff that goes in the pipe.
Yeah, but I think, Daniel, I would say, and it's interesting. You're talking about things of monetizing it, but I guess, do you think, and this is to everybody, like part of adoption and part of, even look at Google, like it's creating things that have some emotional connection, right? At the end of the day, the things that Brian mentioned, Jordan mentioned, who mentioned that, and everything has to me, I guess I don't see it as a distraction. Like, I see the things that these applications are things that actually create a monetization that is beyond sticky, right? Like that's a stickiness that's hard to break free. And as a service provider, right? Like, isn't that what you guys want? Like, isn't that what the opportunity is to lock in, not only being able to support a community, but to be able to have something that's like, I'm not going to get rid of that.
Well, I think my point is, and I'm not discounting the value, and I think providers should be doing that. My point is, the next 3 years are going to be another land grab, and if you're not focused on highly efficient deployment, and you're going to lose out. And so it's certainly not a bad thing, and I'm certainly not discouraging providers from doing the one-offs and helping the local guy. But answering the question of the topic of the day that you put out, which was monetizing, I think from a long-term perspective, if we look at what the opportunities are in the next 3 years, we have to be very focused as providers in order to get the most opportunity out of out of what's in front of us.
Well, one,
Yeah, it's
one
all
way to take a
about-
look at it is, I mean, in Maine, we're providing a choice that they've never had. I mean, so if you're looking at a multiplier force, that market at 800 billion is predicated on a certain number of choices available. Those choices are going to explode by the consumer. They've never had a choice. They've been at the behest of an incumbent or a monopoly for the last 20, 30 some odd years. And now this whole ecosystem is providing them the opportunity to say, well, actually, I'm going to think about this and I'm going to choose which one I want. So, and I think that is going to have its own velocity. That is going to determine its own trajectory, because the consumer for the first time is going to feel empowered with the power that they carry in this marketplace. I mean, there's a reason why in the past, the telecommunications sector is what, the second most hated, sector by the consumer. There's a reason for that, because we pillaged. Well, let's be frank, we pillaged, right? So now we're resetting that. Well, in that resetting, I think Daniel's correct. It's a land grab, but it's going to change that picture for this industry and the consumer, because they are just realizing how much they are now in the driving seat. Whether it's them building their networks and sourcing it out to operators, or ISPs doing it in partnership with them, or them doing it themselves, this is a major tectonic shift. This is like, those old days when we thought we only had to go on, a Constellation Air because we need to travel from New York to San Francisco. And now we can pick whichever flight we choose post-pandemic. I think this is going to be like that. There's an enormous amount of multiplier that's in there because of that choice, especially these.
I think you're, Param and Daniel, I mean, I totally get where you guys are coming from. And maybe to give you a little bit of background on where Nick and I are coming from, we come from working for an old incumbent, and I had to dig this up. And I don't know if you guys can see that, but it says Bell South Business System.
Oh boy.
And then the top of this is Sun Microsystems.
Ooh.
So we used to have a lot of fun, and Nick and I helped host a Bell South Classic in Atlanta well over 20 years ago. And then it was all about trying to eke out one more dollar, because, at the time people could easily, come and rent our pairs and deliver the same type of service. So it was so hard to differentiate ourselves. But you're right, this is a complete new world. And what's so exciting, when I was looking at some of the stats, when you look back at copper networks, they had probably 6-7 carriers dominate more than 80% of the entire US market. And now when you look at fiber deployments, over 25% of the deployments are coming from small carriers. To me, that is so exciting, right? Not only for this panelist group, as well as us working for small carriers, because we're empowering the community now, right? You're right, that what's ahead of us is like so incredibly different. We're not even sure how to grab it. I totally get where Daniel's coming from, because it's like, okay, we definitely want to do some cool things along the way, but right now is the time to connect as many people as possible, because if we get there first, we win the race, right? And then we can work on all kinds of super cool, amazing stuff that may be something that we provide as a service provider entity, or that we're just simply enabling, right? That's the beauty of what you guys are creating today. We don't have to enable all of it. We just have to get the connection there, right? And they're going to be willing to pay for it. So it's definitely a different time for sure from our days 20 years ago, Nick.
Yeah.
Just to be clear, for the viewing audience, our vast viewing audience, I want to make the point, I have never worked for a big monopoly. So I don't even know how to think like that.
Yeah.
What year was that?
Himself.
What year was that you were doing the open?
Oh gosh, Nick. Well, I mean,
In the late 90s.
Yeah.
I was in high school. That's where I was.
Thanks.
Way to make us feel old there, man. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks. That's nice. Yeah, that's
I
nice.
shaved.
You're
today,
welcome.
so you couldn't see
Yeah.
all the gray
We
hair.
had that was the days of speaking of wireless, was of the BlackBerry, the iPager.
Mm-hmm.
If
And
you
that's
guys
the
recall
point.
that.
That's the point I was making earlier, is, and I think that was the point Karim made too, is we're driving on different vehicles and the roads were made, right? We're using different cell phones than the brand we started using. It's so hard to anticipate this, but when you talk about monetizing, what Daniel's talking about is like this, yeah, and everybody in the call has been talking about, there's this balloon effect of how fast can you expand to provide a choice to customers, but you're not going to be able to actually monetize that network for a while, right? If you were really smart as a provider, you'd build out one town and then the next town and the next town, but you're not taking care of the customer that needs you the fourth town over. So it's an interesting dilemma we have because enough money has flowed into the market lately where, and this started with CAF2 and the Reconnect program, where even equity partners are starting to step up. Utilities are starting to step up. There's new entrants. Daniel's making the point earlier that, you know, or just now that he was in high school. He's one of those anomalies where he doesn't have any gray in his beard yet, right? But he's still out there building a fiber network.
He's too
and
blonde.
so there's a lot of new entrants in the market and everybody's trying to solve for this known problem. Are you going to be able to monetize it? It's a land grab, like Daniel said. I don't even think you're monetizing at this point.
So I guess the question is the chicken or the egg. Is it, do you, like Brian said, do you connect to the net? Do you get the infrastructure, or do you develop applications and do things that are going to drive adoption, right? That are going to drive interest. I mean, you can't do one without the other, but you also, one has to come.
You know, just going through a CARES Act build on a very tight timeline, there's absolutely no time to develop, you know, interest or applications. It's all about construction. I mean, there's so much subsidy out there. I mean, traditionally a small operator, it would be very prudent to sell before the build, and that's typically the way most operators would do it. They wouldn't build speculatively. But when you flip the model and get significant upfront funding that it, you know, is subsidized and not yours, and they're just willing to give it to you, then that risk is off the table, and you just go for it. And I mean, there are some risks downstream of that. I mean, one of them is, you know, I mean, we built, like I said, millions of dollars worth of plant in a short amount of time. That plant comes with significant OpEx day one that you do not have revenue for, because you can't, you know, as hard as you may work to monetize a network, when you build it at extreme speeds, at least we haven't found a model where you can kind of, you know, sign up your full penetration rate in a month or two. You know, it traditionally, you know, takes at least 18 months to get some sort of stabilized stream, and another 18, you know, about 3 years to get kind of where your targets need to be. And so there is certainly a challenge with the back end of, you know, this is like everything COVID, right? The whole process is flipped on its head. And right now, I think builders for the next 3 years are just going to be building as fast as they can and monetizing it after the fact.
You're saying monetizing the pipe is a marathon, not a sprint.
Well, it's like you know, it's like somebody, you know, you're going to get picked up by the car, but the car drove 30 miles that way, and you got to go catch up to it. It's just not synced naturally, because you have these unnatural market forces in play, specifically huge amounts of subsidies. And so you got to act now with the build, and it creates havoc in an organization when you have all hands on deck for build, and the marketing team and the sales team is just left behind in the dust, and they have to they really have to retool, and that's what we did. I don't know what you did, Brian. Like for the 3 months that we were like hyper building, the sales team was in a locked in an office retooling, because there's like, we know what's about to hit here when all this network's done. We have no infrastructure in place to monetize this pipe today. And so it's going to take 3 months just to retool the team, start monetizing, when you do like a quantum leap in your construction like that. And so it's just I think this is kind of one of the themes of this conversation, is these significant paradigm shifts in our thinking. And so,
So how do you, I guess, or to everybody, at the end of the day, I get it. So if there's the opportunity right now to build, there's a lot of capital, there's a lot of opportunity. You guys represent multiple states right now of service providers. So what would be your recommendations? Like, what would you tell your peers, other service providers? What would you tell them to do right now in order to get ahead of that, to get ahead of the curve? And also acknowledging, though, that, part of getting people excited, and Brian, I thought you captured it great, about there is an emotional element of inspiring your teams, right? I mean, there is that piece of it that if you do, hard things about hard things, right? You got to get people excited and moving forward. And some of that goes beyond just the math.
Well, so, I'll say one last thing, and I'll let everybody respond, but 100%, like, hardest thing we've done as a company probably ever. And it wears on people. They get frustrated and demotivated. I tell you the thing we did, and if you go to our website and just look at the videos, like, just, what motivates people is like the success stories, the stories of, we have a plow train that's got 2 bulldozers, in front of a plow, yanking this plow through like concrete dirt, just creating solutions, and just people. We got a county commissioner that was, a linebacker in college, big tough guy, crying because his county got real broadband for the first time. I got that on video. That's the stuff that drives, people that come to work every day and love their job and work really hard, and work long hours and get through some of the toughest work we probably have ahead of us for the next 3 years. And so if you go to I might have said website, but our Facebook page for Idea Tech, it's a lot of great stories. And that's what we literally took a part of our budget, a big part. People don't like to do this. I mean, right off the bat is like, this is for marketing in the middle of, this push. And that small sliver of marketing paid huge dividends from motivation for community buy-in, etc. So,
all right, what about the rest of you guys? What would you tell people? What would you tell your peers?
I guess if I can jump in real quick, and I kind of want to go twofold. Daniel made the statement how you can't sell when you're in a growth phase because you end up being behind. I go all the way back to 2007, and it's a great reference because as a cooperative, we had fiber in a lot of our towns, and we weren't yet offering television service, and so we knew the only way to essentially get enough market share to make it viable and to run the competitor out of our market was to pre-sell. So we were overbuilding our entire market, our 3 competitive towns we had, and we were overbuilding side by side with the competitor essentially of fiber to the home. And we were holding events, we were doing, come eat a hot dog and sign up for your service, but we didn't turn anybody up. We didn't turn a single soul up. It was just wait, let's get the NIT on, let's get the fiber to the home, get the services built. And what we did was the competitor was watching us do this, but wondering why nobody was turned up. And so what we did is we held off and we turned up, we got every single, person we could find, every person in the company was out turning up service. We turned up 550 customers in 72 hours. And we told them, do not disconnect until your service is up and running and we tell you to disconnect. We will pay for the last month of your current service. Our direct competitor, Mechanic Communications, in our 3 markets, lost 543 customers in 2 days.
That
And
had to
so
feel good.
the second day, here's how it worked, right? So the second day, the operation manager there said, okay, it's 1.2 million. You want the plant, it's yours, but let all your brothers know this won't happen again. So I think in that regard, right, you pre-sold it. We're doing everything else, just like Daniel had talked about during the COVID. We laid fiber in the ground of 400 homes that didn't have fiber for free to connect people up, because in North Dakota, they're so rural and everybody was working from home and kids are working from home. We did it for free. And when we did it for free, now how many of those 400 customers that we ran fiber to, whip fiber on the ground, zip tied to chain link fence, strung from laundry poles, I mean, just everything you could think of, over snowbanks to make it work? How many of those customers are we gonna have left? Do we retain 20%? Do we retain 30%? Who knows, right? But at that point, the world stops. So what the hell's the difference? I mean, no one's doing anything, and we never stopped, right? Just like Daniel's talking about, you push and push and push, right? That was doing with our money, right? With the understanding that at some point you'll be able to monetize it, right? But we got a lot of fiber that we're having to go pull back out. With fiber, we're having to peel back, and that was a risk we were willing to take. But I think as you look forthcoming and you look at the process that telecoms are going through, and we've heard the term land grab happen at countless times, at least here in North Dakota. We're pretty rural, right? So the people that can grab the land that's available, and the customers and the community connect grants and the broadband plan, all these different things, there's very few cooperatives in North Dakota that are willing to do that. There are some that are proactive and working like us, but very few aren't, right? They're going to sit and try to ride it out and use their ACAM money for the next 7 years, and then they'll figure it out, right? And I guarantee there's not a single person on this call who doesn't believe that in the near future, not a single person that offers internet, TV, and phone is going to be anything but a pipe to the world. That's where we are all headed. We are all going to be a pipe to the world, because just like Daniel alluded to, the providers of the world do not care about the pipe. They just want to be on it. That's all they care about. So you're going to end up being a provider of a pipe to the world. And are you going to have to offer these services? Maybe you do, right? But ultimately, you're going to end up being out of the market, because there's going to be so many applications that you can't collectively offer enough of them to be, marketable in the market in which you have to. And I look at our population. I mean, we're in very rural North Dakota. The average age of our customer is north of 45 years old. And I tell people all the time, we're a cooperative. We are member owned. I'm not sitting in my office. I'm sitting in the member's office. They own this office. I don't own this office. It's not my office. It's their office. And so I look at that from the member standpoint, and we talk about it all the time. Somebody who's 50 and 65 years old, they care about the cooperative. They care about being a member of a cooperative because their mom was, and they are, and by God, by the cooperative, for the cooperative. Their daughter and grandson want the best product at the cheapest price, and they do not care about their capital credit checks, because they're never going to see a dime anyways. But we're seeing this concept and this market thought process shift, right? And so we had to transition with that and go, okay, look at our market, right? And we had our 6,000 or 5,500 co-op customers that were co-op members, and we had these other 5,000 customers that were in ILEC that weren't cooperative members. And our co-op members fought for the last 4 years to not let them in, because it's our cooperative, and I'll be goddamned if the Metro people are going to be in our cooperative. Well, guess what? Effective about 2 weeks ago, we have more ILEC customers than CLEC customers for the first time ever. So how do you go about that? So I think Daniel makes a couple of great points, right? On the idea that the market shifts and the thought process shifts, and the stories are great, and the winning the battle by pre-selling everybody and 20 truck, those are great stories, right? But ultimately, in 2007, we had the forethought to go, okay, how do we win, right? How do we win? How do we monetize that pipe? And now we don't have a competitor, with the exception of Dish and Direct. We don't have a competitor. And the thing is, okay, you have the Verizons and the AT&Ts of the world, great. who provides the fiber to their tower? We do. So they pay us either way, right? I mean, and then when they're when it goes down, you have the 99.9% reliability, and it goes down, there's a storm, whatever it may be, your fiber to the home is still there. And so I just really think that as we look forward into this, how many pieces of tools can you put on that piece of glass you have in the ground of the home? But more importantly, how stable can you make that piece of glass, and how stable can you make your network? Because we're all in 10 to 15 to 20 years are going to be one thing and one thing only. We are going to be a pipe to the customer, and that's it. And if you don't believe that, you're crazy, because that's where we're going to end up. And it might be 20 years, who knows, right? But ultimately, you're going to be a pipe to the world, because you can't offer the same products for the same price in the same threshold that the rest of the market can.
So let me ask you a question then, guys. I think what I'm hearing is a huge shift, right? And if I may, it sounds like basically it's really a race to get fiber to every demand point. And has the model changed? In the essence that should the advice to other small ISPs that are growing right now with obviously abnormal economics, right? Like Daniel said, it's very unusual for our space right now. Is the focus really on just getting the pipe there? And do you guys believe that the service providers should really be focused, on that layer 1, layer 2 aspect of services, and let all these other additional services be just simply an enablement, that the fiber is an enablement factor? So should the ISPs keep it really clean and focus on uptime, connectivity to as many points, and really let all the other services ultimately in the long run be provided by cloud service providers and everyone else that can get on to that network? I mean, are we going through a major shift right now that should be considered?
Yeah, I think so. We've always been kind of a purist shop, and we like simple products, and like I said, I think I think what you're seeing is kind of a shift in kind of when you go into new markets with fiber, there's a maturity cycle involved in it, and some of the stuff that we're talking about related to monetizing the pipe, kind of what you typically talk about in a conversation like this is kind of opportunities to increase margin by a few percentage points, and that's not what we got on the table right now. We have millions and millions of dollars of immediate opportunity, and you're willing to forego the maturity of some of your products and the need to create kind of a competitive edge through those things, and those are the kind of the two components. Like you're probably searching for a competitive edge or additional margin, and neither one of those are a factor if you've just been written a check to build fiber somewhere. And so yeah, I think it has shifted, or will shift, to continue to shift the model away from the traditional thinking of monetizing the pipe, and it's really a secondary factor to just getting as much fiber in the ground as quickly as you can.
Yeah, I think it has to be. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Right.
No, I was going to say I understand the whole idea of coming from a very streamlined sort of a pure approach, but I do think two things. One is there has to be intentionality on universal service. I think you have to be intentional about it. And we spend a fair amount of time thinking that through. And I think people like us have a little bit of nimbleness and flexibility on doing that, rather than the large sort of behemoths who have sort of cherry pick things, right? So we don't have to cherry pick. We can include the community because you're part of the community. So I think that's an important part in terms of what the ISP's responsibility is. And then building on that, look, when a customer calls, even when they have password issues on their Chrome, they call us, right? Because at the end of the day, We are the only phone that they know and the only human beings that happen to pick up. So I think it's wise of the ISPs to understand what are the obligations that the consumer feels that we have to fulfill. And if you need to, then okay, how do you make that part of your business model, right? And I don't think that that dynamic is going to shift. In fact, I think it's going to get higher and higher because ISPs, I believe, are going to be like library curators. They're going to be in the position of being the collation of expertise, whatever that is. But we are going to be looked upon that lens because the world is immensely complicated. It's going to become more complicated. But the consumer's looking at us to say, can you help me just understand things? Right? So this is really simple stuff. I mean, we get calls from people saying, okay, my Wi-Fi is going on crazy. Well, it's some Wi-Fi that they got from Best Buy. But do we hang up the phone and say, well, that's not our problem, you go figure it out? We don't do that, can't do that, right? And I think as Brian said, if there's more applications, whether it's a smart home, whether it's a sensor in your water, whether it's a sensor in your, your thermostat, whatever that is, heck, your sensor in your freaking laundry machine, we are going to get that call. Make no mistake about it, because the 1-800 number doesn't answer. And we are going to be in that place where we are going to have to manage those multiplicity of expectations. So today we may just say, look, we're just going to head down and just build. But you got to be able to have the culture, the company culture, to say, hey, we have an obligation to the consumer. And I think that's immensely, immensely important because I think it does generate revenue, but more importantly, it makes the network be sustainable, right? And if at the end of the day, the consumer is going to say, oh, I'm going to pay you $55 or $60, that value is for the first time going to be directly translated to actual value. Because prior they paid $90 and got something up to. Who goes and buys a car that only gets you up to 16 miles a gallon, or a pack of butter that gets up to a pack of butter? So the up to has been very insidious. This whole, we'll give you triple play, quad plays, very insidious. So we have to figure out what is that thing that the consumer is looking for. And I think they're going to be looking at us for a ton of stuff. And I don't think it's enough to sort of pull back and say, well, that's somebody else's problem. I don't think it is. The market would not allow that, I believe.
So let's
ultimately, we're all setting ourselves apart right now by being the people that can be reached to that point. And we're all setting ourselves apart by saying our support's local. You talk to a person here, our billing's all in-house. We don't farm it out. We don't make these big quarter-to-quarter decisions like these public companies do. So these are all interesting points because we still have to be in touch with our community. And to answer the question earlier of what advice would I give other providers, one of the things that we didn't do a good job at over the last few years, we did a great job of expansion, but we didn't do good enough work within the community to say what we're doing, what services we were working on to improve. The customers that we signed up for our service knew about it and knew about, hey, these guys answer the phone. These guys do a good job, but we didn't do well within the community as far as getting the word out on our plans, on our investments, and building relationship with the city council, the town council, the county commissioners. And so we're actually learning that that there's some value to that. And it's an extension of what was just said. There's a connection that everyone builds from a provider standpoint with the customer, but there's also that connection with the community. And there's some stewardship associated with running a network within the community. And so you pair those things up, answering the phone, answering the customer's call, helping them with a Wi-Fi unit that they didn't even buy from you. That's important. I agree with that. We've never timed our calls here. We've never timed our tech support calls and said, be sure you got the phone and try to pump through the volume. Not once, right? We've had people deliver, we've had ladies deliver cookies to our tech support department. That's like a big moment of success for us. But if my advice was out there, I would add to what was just said and say, connect with your customer and connect with your community. And connect is obviously almost a pun at this point, but that's what we're doing, right? And recognize that we're connecting, because here's the other interesting thing too. I've started to see I had somebody talk to me this week and said, hey, have you heard about this company in Montana? So I look at their website. They're a wireless ISP that all of a sudden bought a plow for fiber, right? There's a lot of creativity going on right now in the market. And I mentioned utilities earlier. There's municipal networks. There's creativity from low Earth orbit satellites. The market is so young for broadband. There's a lot of things can be done. And if I were a new provider starting up, I would build that relationship with the community, with the customer, have the hot dogs, have the barbecue. There was a broadband provider in Colorado that had their own beer made for their festival. Do whatever it takes to get that word out, because it's about getting the word out that people have a choice, because they haven't had a choice.
So let's pivot to one final topic. So obviously, we joked about being fiber snobs. Drink. Oh, come on. Come on. That's the term. But in all seriousness, if we all agree that obviously the building now is key, the connecting with the community, is there clarity though on these communities understanding the value of fiber, right? Because if there is so much media, Daniel mentioned Elon Musk and Starlink and what's happening there, but arguably there's a lot, depending on where you're getting your news or what you're reading. You can have varied opinions on, hey, I'm just going to get 5G, I'm just going to get satellite. Is there an opportunity to help drive education on fiber to help this monetization in the long run?
That's our job. That's what we have to do, right? Because the word insidious was used. That's the first time I've heard it used for broadband. And
I was thinking Star Wars, but
it's perfect. There's a job to be done to communicate with everyone what's possible with this technology. Because what people are realizing now is, I saw an article in the city of Houston where people are seeing pedestals put in the right of way. It is the right of way, right? But now they've got a pedestal sitting outside their living room window, and they're looking at it saying, this is really annoying. There has to be some communication on what this does and what this enables, because that same pedestal, if it's a fiber pedestal, might be now serving their child at home, to homeschool. So there's that communication necessary for sure. And the hard part about it is it's obscured by large companies and their messages and terms like 5G and whatnot. The big companies make it harder, and they refocus everybody's gaze on something that's not important, right? Or something that's a distraction, because this is about connectivity and improving speed. But there's some companies out there that want to slow down development and keep it controlled for their investors.
Yeah, I think Brian is on point. I couldn't agree more. And one of the things at least we have had success in is just having a lot of conversation, whether it's a town hall meeting, the select board meeting, the baked bean, kind of events. It's just having that conversation and having it in a way that's non-judgmental. I think that's important. Having it in a way that's empathetic, because the consumers have been given this massive dose of a lot of information that is non-contextual, right? Yeah, sure, 5G, I'll have it tomorrow and be able to watch, the next, the Winter Soldier and the Falcon on Disney Plus, which is not possible here in rural Maine, right? Or yeah,
some
sure.
5G, maybe you're going to get cancer from it. So that's the total extremes.
Hey, Nick, we get asked those questions, and we have to sort of walk it through, right? So we say, look, what kind of data? Where'd you read it? What are the sources? Here are some science behind it. And you have to respect where that perspective is coming from and be transparent in your ability to trying to be objective and show what the source of that data is, and then to be able to counteract that with some facts, right? So if it's 5G, well, let's look at the facts. If it's the low Earth orbit, hey, we've had a couple of people get that. And are they really getting those speeds? Maybe. But there's an installation cost. And Who is going to pick up your customer support call, right? So that kind of stuff. It takes a long time. It's repetitive. It's not the second, third, fourth, maybe on the seventh or eighth time does that kind of a relaxed conversation then start to seep in. And then they say, okay, I get you. Now I got another list of 10 questions. So it requires an enormous amount of patience, which one could argue is not in our best interest. But I would counter argue that it is actually in our best interest because we're playing the long ball. Because once those customers trust you, once they believe that you are a validated source of trust, then they're going to stick with you through thick and thin. And that is a very human thing, right? So we're not in the business of just having a monetary transaction. We're in the business of a human inter-exchange that bleeds down to their 5 kids being able to get on a Zoom call. And trust me, I have them, right? Zoom call without the wheel of death of life taking place. And that's enormously frustrating, enormously frustrating. And then the kid's going, I can't do my band practice. And what am I doing? And I throw the band thing out of the window. Then you're like, as a father, well, no, I should bring that back. You really need your education. It's a good thing. But I think these are really sort of these elemental things that require enormous amount of conversation. And we get that every day.
I think the FCC needs to invest in a PR plan on fiber, huh?
Well, yeah. I think we have a whole new future episode, Nick, where we can just focus on fact checking, right? I mean, think about it.
We get the truthiness of fiber.
I moved into this house. I call the broadband provider. I won't mention them by name. And so I'm like, yeah, I'm really interested in getting your fiber service. And, at the time I was the one that sold them the fiber GPON products. So I knew exactly, what they're doing, where they're doing it. And they say, yeah, we got fiber. Yeah, we have a great offering. Yeah, we can do 80 meg. And I'm like, 80 meg? What are you talking about? I want fiber. And they're like, yeah, no, we got fiber. It's fiber. And I'm like, no, but you said 80 meg. You mean like DSL, bonded VDSL? And they're like, no, it's DSL, but it's fiber DSL. It's like I only got the right connection because I then called the local planner for the telco to say, hey, buddy, I went and bought this house because you told me we were going to have the fiber there, right? Like literally, and he's like, what? And then, the database wasn't updated, this and that. I ultimately got my fiber, but it's that kind of stuff, right? It's misinformation. The CSR didn't know, and what's the difference? And so I definitely feel for you guys because you do have to handhold them right now. And I talked to my mom, and it's like they just hear this stuff on the news and this and that, and what a complex issue actually. And for us, people that know fiber, and when you get it there, we know what it is, and it's so simple, but it's so complex to the community.
And I don't know, man. This is almost one of the holy grails of our industry. It's very hard to reach a level where the consumer is ever going to be fully educated on our product. I mean, you got people calling the internet their Wi-Fi and their fiber their wireless, and we laugh, but it's just it's not even close. Like they don't understand the product, and then you try to go have conversations with policymakers, and they're just as bad. Like they don't understand the technology or how it works or why Elon Musk isn't going to stop the need for fiber construction and all of that. And so it's certainly, Grim said the long ball strategy is certainly there. I think one thing that has worked for us certainly didn't solve, this large problem in our industry, but it did help. It's pre-marketing, just efforts associated with, explaining what you're doing, putting flyers out before you start construction, having the pre-meetings with civic leaders, and, making very simple one sheets, talk about the key parts of what you're doing, and what these things are called, and explaining what a pedestal might look like in the front yard, and, who to talk to if you've got a problem, and then we've had success too with, just the point of communication. If you have people just like, number one, you got to make sure all your field techs are approachable and are willing to speak to people. It's funny, my company finally got to the point where I don't know everybody, and that's just I don't know, it's kind of a sad and proud moment at the same time, I guess. But I was taking my boys to Kansas City, and we stopped in at a rural town, and I saw one of our fiber splicers there, and I opened the door and I said, "Would you show these boys, how you're doing this?" And he had no idea who I was. But it was a good test, and he took the time. Like, you could tell he was really busy. And at first he was kind of reluctant, but he said, "Yeah."
He's like, "Who the hell are you?"
Yeah. And he took the time to explain it. And if I was a guy living in town, that would have been a sale, right? Like, that guy took time to show my boys what fiber is, and I'd absolutely buy something from somebody that did that for my kids. And so I think just that kind of image, and making sure, your salespeople are walking, door to door, like, they're not calling, they're out there, they're running into people. I think that's the magic, secret sauce in a lot of ways, and pulling something like this off.
Clearly, and I think COVID has exacerbated that, right? People want to connect with people, no pun intended.
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
So guys, we've shockingly, but we have actually been talking for almost an hour, and I think it's we're about at that time for our final parting thoughts. So obviously, great conversation, lots of great advice on kind of where the monetization of the pipe, so to speak, is going, and from land grabs to leveraging broadband to be the pipe to the world, to how it really affects all things from smart grids and AI and infrastructure. So I'd just like to go around robin, like, what kind of some parting thoughts on kind of any final thoughts you have on this topic, and anything you want to tell your peers, your audience, or the communities, because at the end of the day, this actually podcast was created about trying to support the communities that we hold really dear. So I'll start with Jordan.
Yeah, I think a lot of the time, we see ourselves as telecom companies, we see ourselves as providers, and we know that, we provide a very important infrastructure piece to the cities and towns we service. And I maybe this is not the right correlation, but there are people in your communities, there are people in my communities that hold us in the same standards of the police officer and the firefighter. There are people that think that way. And I think if you, at least in our market, I think if you ever find yourself deviating from realizing that, you'll lose. And I think there's so many opportunities as a company where you want to run, and you want to grow the business, and you want to put the fiber in the ground, and you want to do these things. And I once saw Beck Sports in an obituary. We made an obituary. I mean, that's when you've made it, right? And one of the statements was, Janice, she passed away and she was 85, and she loved spending her nights watching her kids play on Beck Sports. And so you don't really understand the play you have in people's lives as their outlet to the world. And sometimes, at least in our case, it's not the outlet to the world, it's the outlet to the world outside of their home. And it may be down the street, right? They may not be able to go to that game that's 6 blocks away because it's 30 below, and they're old and they're frail, and they'll slip and they'll fall, and they just can't go anymore. So to be able to offer that service and to get handmade cards, the cookies, the same type of deal. Our guys are signing autographs at places, and the people, I've had a beer or two bought for me on an overnight trip at a bar at a town of 400. I spent a week at a town of 400 one night. So, I mean, you just don't understand the impact you have. And I think we can get lost in the idea that go, run, grab. You got to get to the next step. And I think those are great pieces. I think we all have to do those to continue to be sustainable. But I think it's important, as I know Karem and Brian have mentioned, and maybe a little bit different for Daniel, but just the idea that when you have those opportunities to maybe take a step back and people kind of put the impact you have in their daily life front and center, take advantage of them. They don't come all that often. I think sometimes they're overlooked. So take advantage of them and realize when you have the opportunity that you truly do make an impact in people's lives, and realize that they want you to be successful just as much as you want you to be successful. And if you keep that in mind, it makes coming to work a hell of a lot easier.
Awesome. Great insight. Karim?
I'll echo Jordan. I'm gonna reach out to him and make sure that we have him, give our next podcast to our customers.
I mean, hey, for a small nominal fee, I'm available at your disposal.
Yeah, I went to school in Minnesota. Know all about North Dakota. My all-time best friend is from Dickinson, North Dakota. So you guys are nuts out there.
Minnesota grain belt premium of the folks over in Minnesota. So little flavor for you, Karim. Absolutely.
I'll just say, look, I think to our peers, I would say, let us keep on being the light. No pun intended. I think we're doing something that's going to have a generational impact. I really, really believe that to my core. What we do will live on decades, maybe generations after we are long gone. And hopefully when we're gone, we have a smile on our face because we should be proud of what we did. To the communities, I would say, find some partner that you trust. Find some partner that you can talk with. Find some partner that is transparent, honest, and has your best interest in ours, because that overlap of private and public benefit, I think, is very, very magical in today's world. So, if you're a community looking at doing a municipal broadband build, find a nice, valuable partner that gets you, that your DNA matches their DNA, because I think there's a multiplier effect over there. And I would say this, that there are dynamics and movements throughout history. And I think we're in one of the largest ones like that. The predominant difference is, I truly, truly believe that the consumer is at the middle of making some very tectonic decisions. And I believe it's our financial, fiduciary, and ethical obligation to encourage that, foster that, make sure that it lives on and on and on. Because I think our kids and their kids will probably be the recipients of a new way of an economic order that's inclusive. It has to be inclusive. And I would urge the communities, and I would urge the ISPs and everybody in this ecosystem, whether it is communities of color, communities of immigrants, communities of economically disenfranchised, we have to make sure they're part and parcel of the decision-making. Because otherwise, the cost of not doing that, the cost of being exclusionary, the cost of redlining, it's monumental. And I don't think we can afford that anymore as a global human society. So.
Awesome. Obi-Wan Worthen.
I don't know how I can top that. I really don't.
I'm glad you're going next.
I do know that in a future program, we should talk about the link between Star Trek and broadband, because there's a whole red shirt aspect of those that don't make it, right? Which everybody knows that's a Star Trek fan. The red shirt guys never make it. They never make the ship.
Never make it. There
are a number of providers that are out there to make money. There are a number of providers out there that are big and they have an obligation to return money to their investors. And I don't think those are the providers are going to move the needle. And I think what we've talked about tonight is the emotion tied to a provider that wants to do well by their community. We could all be in a different business that's probably a lot easier. And I always tell people that we're in a business that's funny. Nobody ever calls us and says, my internet is fantastic. It just doesn't happen, right? You only hear from people that are frustrated and upset. And our job is to do better at that. And I think we have an advantage, but the people on this on this video and the people who have been on the past videos and people that Daniel mentioned, like at FISPA and some other groups, they want to do right by their customers. They want to do right by their communities. And that's who is going to move the needle in today's market. It's easy to go build something and construct something in a community and move on, right? And you don't have that same relationship. This is about relationships. It's actually not about a return on investment or monetizing. I would contend that we're the anti-monetizers. We're the guys that forge ahead, hoping for a good result and trying to build that local capital with the community that will allow us to have a good living and leave us feeling with a sense of accomplishment. And I used to ride around town with a guy that was in construction. We drive by a building and say, I worked on that building. I worked on that building. I think that's what we're going to be in the future. We're going to be the guys that in our old age are going to be driven around by our grandkids and say, I worked in that town and I did. You see that fiber ped right there? We did that. And that's what we're in business for.
Some sooner than later. I'm 35. You guys are a hell of a older than me. I mean, I think Daniel's in my
Come
world,
on, guy.
Everyone else, Daniel and I are together, but everyone else, you guys, I mean, you're old, so hate to be the bearer of bad news.
All right, Daniel.
Yeah,
Any parting thoughts?
These are tough acts to follow. I wanted to just side note before I leave. I was curious if Jordan, do you have a sound effects machine in there? Because like, do you do like DJ work on the side too?
No, I do call games broadcaster, actual TV
well,
broadcaster.
I mean, not DJ, but like, do you have a sound effects machine? I'm just curious.
No.
Okay, all right. No. I was just curious, but
Up at the Howard Stern show.
These are really really good points, and like I said, it's really hard to follow. I think the points of generational impact, and the idea that we'll all be making impact today that has permanent positive effect in the communities that we operate in is really what, I mean, that just motivates, I think, everybody in our industry. And I think that is a big deal. Just to round out the fiber snob perspective, I really think to do this right, like for some reason we haven't been able to do this right. I mean, we live in the greatest country in the world and we still can't figure out how to get broadband, like real broadband that's scalable for the future to all Americans. Like we were able to do that with POTS lines. And we can't figure this out for broadband, 20 years later.
For everybody that knows POTS lines, that's your analog line that you call. So people that don't know what POTS, plain old telephone line.
Plain old telephone.
I mean,
Jordan needed the explanation.
I kind of take this speech to our state legislature, and I was multiple times told, you cannot say that to these people because these are the people that think they're doing a good job. Mm-hmm. But I've told them, like, I am embarrassed for our state. Like, we're in, we've continually been in the bottom 1/5, right? And our country, who's not typically in the top 10. And like I said, we're the most innovative country in the world, and we can't figure this out. Like, what is going on? And this is the opportunity of a lifetime. Like, probably the one thing, well, there's two things. I mean, one of the primary things has been funding, and I think that will be sufficiently solved. The other one is competition, and really a lack of, I think people, policymakers, communities, even consumers think that that's dangerous. And I think the fact that you're pouring so much money into it is going to overwhelm the system that has got all of these protections around competition. And I think we're going to finally break that barrier. And I think we need to let people know, let policymakers know, let community members and community stakeholders know that competition is extremely valuable. You want to embrace it. You want to allow competitive interest in, and you want a choice for your people, because that's really what creates, good service, innovative products, and high value, whether it's speed or lower cost. And so you combine these forces together, and I think we're going to balance out. And it has to be fiber. Like, if you want to do it today, like, maybe Elon Musk will solve all our problems in the next 20 years. But if you want to do it today, you have to get an infrastructure out there that is highly scalable for the next 20 years. Like, we can theorize about wireless in your next podcast if you want, but we all know what will work today, and we finally have the funding to probably do it. So we better do it right. Like, this is our industry's chance to do it right and cut the crap with all the anti-competitive behavior and all the political BS. Let's do it right.
All right, so let's close it out with our host, Mr. Hollister. Let's close out on your final parting thoughts for episode 7.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you all for being part of this. It's one of the best parts of Nick and I's job is being able to work with folks like you all. And our mission is so great. I mean, we are doing such great things, and this is such a great cast that it's just amazing to be a part of this movement. And it is about digital equity, right? And it is the fabric, clearly, that's continuing to stitch our communities together, right? Not only locally, but statewide, nationally, worldwide. And I think what I'm hearing today is there's a couple takeaways in my mind that are really sticking out. We need to continue to run as fast as we can to connect as many people as we can, and we need to be able to do that in a way where we're connecting with the community leaders. We have a great responsibility in making sure that as we're building and we're going really fast, that we're making sure we're connecting and bringing up the community as fast as possible too. And if we do this right, it's like, the tide that rises, raises all boats, right? And there's a big aspect that when we're educating the community, we've got to make sure that we're educating all aspects of the community. People prior to the pandemic thought every metro is just good, they're fine. And what we realized is there's holes within the metros, right? And a lot of it is about digital equity and education and getting these folks connected to affordable access. So we have a great responsibility in being community leaders and carrying this flag. And we need to make sure that we're helping these communities go on this journey. There's so many communities that just don't know where to start. And they're so focused on just putting, the glass in the ground. But what's really the business model, and how are you going to make sure everyone's going to get connected? And so I think we can do a great job by educating the community while moving very quickly. And what I'm really hearing is this is about speed, right? And the beauty of it is today is the service providers don't have to provide all the services, right? And nor do you want. You're providing and enabling a platform for many decades of innovation to come. And for us to be a part of that is truly one of the greatest humbling aspects of our life, right? And we have a ton of work to do. And let's stay focused, let's stay hungry, let's continue to inspire, our teams to work crazy long hours and stay focused on doing the greater good. Because you guys, all of us, we're doing this, and this is a great responsibility that we all have, and it's going to be something that will be talked about for generations. I talked with someone the other day that was part of building the highway system, and the stories that came from that were so cool, and the impact that their company had and where it ultimately went from being part of just such a major movement. Guys, we're there, we're in the middle of it, and it's never been more exciting. And so I would just encourage all of you to stay strong, stay focused. You know, we do these things to drink beer together and have fun, and continue to fight the fight, and let's continue to make it happen, because to Daniel's point, we have a ton of work to do, and there's a ton of folks that, you know, the digital divide is a digital chasm right now. And because of this last year, it's even more important. And if COVID's done one thing, it's thrown the fuel on a fire that needs to rage and make sure that everyone understands across all political sides that we all have to stay focused on this and run and continue to get this thing solved. Because once we're connected across this great country, every single person's connected. Just think of the innovation to come. Think of what your kids and their kids will be doing over this network you're building. It makes my
Cheers to that.
In a great way.
Cheers to
Thank you,
that.
guys.
Cheers,
Cheers,
that
everybody.
sounds like Avengers Assemble, just like in the movies.
You got it, baby.
Oh my goodness.
Thanks, guys.